what's up? Welcome back to Smiles for Miles. I'm Brian, coming at you from house arrest, and this week on house arrest, I've been thinking about the power of mental framing and how just the frame that you put around your experiences in your own mind has just such a profound, deeply profound effect on how you experience your life and how you interact with your world. I'm interested in the ways that our mental framing ties into these ideas of addiction and how us as people who have suffered from serious addictions should proceed, or what the most skillful way to proceed is when it comes to thinking about ourselves as addicts or what. And I kind of want to drill down on this idea of once an addict, always an addict. This is something that is pretty prevalent in addiction recovery culture, particularly like 12-step culture. And I'm concerned about adopting that view for myself, and I'm going to tell you why. I was reading about what's called psychogenic phenomena. You'll have to excuse me, I'm going to keep looking down because I got my notes here. I don't know how to do the teleprompter thing yet. So I was reading about psychogenic phenomena, and when something is psychogenic, it means that there is an effect, a real-life effect that is had on an individual or group of individuals, the origin of which is purely psychological. A good example of something that is psychogenic is like the placebo effect, right? You give somebody a water pill, tell them it's a certain drug, and it has a certain effect, which means the effect was completely caused by their own psychology, right? Nothing was in the pill. They just believed that something was going to happen, and it did based on what they believed about it. So there are tons of studies and there's tons of research on just how powerful the psychogenic effect can be. And I'll give you just a few quick examples here. There's just tons of studies showing people who develop symptoms to water pills, obviously, like we just were talking about, when they see other people that are just like undercover actors feigning symptoms, people will develop symptoms more frequently themselves if they just believe that somebody else is experiencing those symptoms. Kind of in that same vein, there's been a bunch of studies done on people who are giving blood, and when they see other people that grow faint after they've donated, they will be more likely to grow faint themselves. So that speaks to how impressionable we can be as human beings. We see others having an experience, and we can kind of adopt that experience and have it ourselves psychologically. But then there's some other research that goes even deeper than this and speaks to how just our beliefs can change our actual physiology. There was one study that stuck out to me on housekeepers. They took a group of housekeepers and they gave them information that said the exercise that you get just doing your daily activities, cleaning house, is enough exercise in all of these ways. It like meets these requirements for daily exercise needs and blah, blah, blah. And just with this information alone, compared to a control group, these housekeepers actually lost weight doing the same thing that they normally did, just believing that what they were doing constituted sufficient exercise. Another interesting one was this study done on altitude sickness. They took a group of people and then kind of inserted into this group this idea that it was dangerous, the altitude change they were going to have when they hiked up this mountain. Based on the information alone, that these people believed that this was a more dangerous situation than it was, or that they were more at risk for having altitude sickness than they were, they afterwards were evaluated medically, like blood samples or however they tested them, and they could measure like neurochemically that they had changes compared to a control group that showed signs of greater like oxygen deprivation or greater altitude sickness. So it wasn't just a symptomatic thing. This was measurable in people's biochemistry. There were other interesting studies about food consumption, where people were primed to believe that they were eating more or less food, even though they had the exact same proportions. And based on what they were told about how much they ate, they would be full for hours longer or more satisfied for hours longer, compared to people who thought they ate less, who were hungry much quicker. In other studies, they would just change the labels on food and have the same kind of results, whether something was labeled as healthy and lean or like hearty and satisfying. And this wouldn't just be affecting the subjects experientially, they were also able to measure this in their biochemistry, again, where it was literally affecting hormone regulation, metabolism, and their ability to absorb nutrients. Other studies have shown that people who feel guilty more about what they're eating are more likely to gain weight than people who don't have that association of guilt with the snacks and the treats that they have. One last one that I'll mention is one that was interesting to me, the sleep study that was done. So subjects' sleep would be evaluated in the lab and measured, and the quality of their sleep and how much sleep they got was measured. And it turned out that people who got plenty of sleep and got good quality sleep, but believed that they didn't get good sleep or enough sleep, were much more likely to show signs of sleep deprivation in a bunch of different areas compared to people who didn't sleep well, didn't get enough sleep, but just weren't that concerned about their sleep or believed that they got good sleep. Those subjects were much more likely to not suffer signs of sleep deprivation. Super interesting. Anyway, so I know I haven't mentioned any specifics about any of these studies, but if you are interested in the specifics of them, I found them all in this book I was reading called The Expectation Effect: How Your Mindset Can Change Your World by David Robson. It was very cool. I recommend it. So the point is that the things that we believe and the things that we're always telling ourselves clearly have a very dramatic effect on how we move through our lives. And because those beliefs and the way we're framing things are so important, it leaves me concerned with this idea of, like, that I keep being told that I should be always considering myself an addict forevermore, right? I understand where that sentiment is coming from. I get that the reason why, the people do that is because they want to always remind themselves that they can't interact with these certain substances that have been problematic for them at all, like normal people can. So I don't have any problem with being aware, remaining aware that you have a tumultuous relationship with certain substances or certain behaviors. That's fine. But is it possible to remain aware of that without constantly living under this, with this belief about yourself? Do I want to always be telling myself that I'm this thing that I'm trying to get away from, actually? And like framing my life with this idea that I'm forever attached to this issue. And one thing that I thought about that seemed to kind of illuminate how this seems to me, this notion of once an addict, always an addict, is what if you changed it to like once a smoker, always a smoker, right? I mean, imagine somebody in your life has been a smoker and quits smoking, right? And then you're hanging out with some other people and somebody busts out a cigarette and says, "Hey, do you want one?" And then, this hypothetical person, we'll call her she, says, "No, I don't smoke." And then the guy leans over to you and says, "Once a smoker, always a smoker, though." I mean, that sounds absurd. That's like totally crazy. She was a smoker maybe, but she doesn't smoke anymore. So she's not a smoker any longer. From what I understand about habits and changing habits, it's actually quite helpful not to frame yourself as a smoker. This is an idea that came up in a book called Atomic Habits, where it was said something that's helpful to do is to, and it used smoking as an example, if you're trying to quit smoking, stop calling yourself a smoker. And when you encounter cigarettes and offers of cigarettes, instead of being like, "Oh no, I'm trying to quit," or "Oh no, I can't do that, I'm trying to stay away from that," it's much more helpful to say, no, I'm not a smoker. This can also be applied to things like eating habits. Like, it's helpful for me when I'm trying not to eat sweets to, when there's sweets in front of me, instead of being like, oh, I'm really not supposed to do that because I'm like a sweet addict. It's much more helpful for me to say, I don't eat sweets. I don't eat sweets. That's just my choice. I'm not going to eat them because I don't want to eat them. It's not because I'm white knuckling it. I don't want to eat them and I'm not going to eat them. In both cases, the desire is to avoid the thing, right? But it just feels like the framing in one case feels a little more desperate, and then in the other case it feels a little bit more dignified is all, I guess. And again, the framing is very important. In the scenario where it feels like you're trying to avoid, it feels like there's a lot more willpower required than to just reframe it as something that you just don't do anymore. There's this theory around willpower that comes from the social psychologist Ray Baumeister and his research, where he thinks of willpower as a mental muscle that tires with time. So he did some experiments where he would have subjects be in a situation where they had to display some sort of willpower or exercise some sort of willpower, like avoid a cookie or something, before they went on to some other mentally tasking thing that they had to do. And they would have much less stamina for it after having to deal with the willpower situation that was completely unrelated to the mental task, but still just it seemed to exhaust them in their mental capacity generally. It just seems to me that people who have suffered from, addictions, whether substance or behavioral or whatever, to keep having to call yourself this and associate yourself with this, and to keep having to remind yourself over and over that yes, you are this thing, and yes, you are, liable to go back to doing this thing, which I suppose you are, but to keep that framing in mind in your life all the time seems like it's very exhausting as far as just your mental willpower goes. It just seems like it takes too much mental effort to keep that frame up, instead of just kind of moving on and realizing that you had this experience or this problem in the past, and you're moving forward and moving away from it. This idea that you're expected to maintain this unrelenting self-control, it just seems like not sustainable to me. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be weary of going back to problematic things that could set us off on this pattern again. It just seems like there's a much less burdensome way to frame it. The mind is very capable of changing. It's very neuroplasticity is a real thing. It's like you're capable of changing and developing new circuits and developing new pathways, and that's what I'm trying to embrace in this new direction in my life. Anyway, enough of all that. The shout out of the week this week goes to my very dear friend Mason. He's been my friend for many years, and it's cool to be in touch with him. We've always been in touch, but it's cool to still be talking to him on a regular basis now. And he actually talked to me this last week and just gave me some said some things I wanted to hear regarding this YouTube channel and keeping it going and the things I should be talking about and stuff. And so that was very, very helpful. So shout out to Mason. Much love to you. The song of the week is You Wreck Me by Tom Petty. I don't know. It's another Tom Petty song. This song's just been stuck in my head all week like crazy. Shout out to the rock star on the new Grand Theft Auto 6 trailer for throwing a Tom Petty song in there. But this is not that song. This is a different song, and I don't know. I love this song. It's, as I've said before about Tom Petty, he's so simple somehow, and yet just so cool. Such cool stuff going on with so little. I don't know how the magic comes out of something so little. complexity in music has really nothing to do with necessarily with how good anything is. You know, there's things that are very, very complex that are very cool, and things that are very complex that are not cool. And then there's things that are so simple that maybe just are stupid, but there's things that are so simple that are just incredible. And Tom Petty seems to always be able to just nail that. I love this song. It's so simple and stupid, but just perfect. All right, I'll see you guys later next week.